Into Portsmouth from Romsey Abbey, where it had lain all night, was brought the body of Countess Mountbatten. The Duke of Edinburgh and his mother, Princess Andrew of Greece, were at the quayside. The sadly bereaved Earl and his two daughters saw the coffin borne towards the frigate Wakeful. 8 chief petty officers were the bearers. It was the wish of Countess Mountbatten that when her time came, she should be buried at sea. They placed the flag-draped coffin on the quarterdeck, and Earl Mountbatten and the family party went aboard. It was a somber scene, in keeping with the most tragic event. Only a few weeks ago, Countess Mountbatten had rejoiced over the wedding of her daughter, and now she herself was no more. The frigate made her way out to sea. Edwina Mountbatten died in her sleep in Borneo. She was only 58. Over her remains, the Archbishop of Canterbury conducted the funeral service. At its conclusion, the body of the Countess was committed to the deep. The Earl cast his wreath upon the sea. Other tributes included one from the Queen and Duke. 20 fathoms below the floating flowers lay the body of Countess Mountbatten.
For more than 30 years, the Queen's uncle, Earl Mountbatten, had taken a summer holiday in the quiet fishing village of Mallamore, County Sligo in Ireland. This year, with members of his family, he set out as usual for a day's fishing in their 30-foot boat, Shadow 5. Out in the bay, it was blown to pieces by the IRA.
Well, we just heard a very loud bang, and we were informed then that Lord Mountbatten's boat had exploded. So immediately I got 2 friends and we went out on the boat to see what we could do. And we arrived there, and those other boats that were in the near vicinity, they were already lifting the survivors.
What was the state of Lord Mountbatten's boat?
Well, it was non-existent. It was just in very small pieces. It's just blown to small bits.
Lord Mountbatten was killed instantly. His grandson Nicholas, aged 14, also died, along with the 17-year-old boatman. Brian Hanrahan described the ceremonies as the nation paid homage at the Earl's funeral, which took place at Westminster Abbey the following month.
Earl Mountbatten's last parade was conducted with the precision he would have expected of such a great occasion. Burma, India, the United States, France and Canada joined Britain in providing an escort for the naval gun carriage. The cocked hat of an admiral of the fleet, his sword of honour and gold stick lay upon the coffin. British Legion standards dipped in turn as it passed through Horse Guards Parade. Lord Mountbatten's charger, Dolly, was led before it, his boots reversed in the stirrups. Lord Mountbatten had arranged many of the details himself and had expressed the hope that the thousands lining the route would enjoy the pomp and pageantry which he liked so much. But the manner of his death, murdered by the IRA, made it a sadder occasion than he'd intended. Many of the royal family drove to Westminster Abbey to wait for the procession's arrival. The Queen led the mourning. The Queen and the Queen Mother were accompanied by Prince Andrew, wearing midshipman's uniform in public for the first time, and Prince Edward. The Royal Marines provided a guard of honour at the Abbey's west door and sounded a fanfare as the coffin arrived. Within the Abbey waited a most distinguished congregation. Kings, queens and princes from all over Europe, representatives of the Commonwealth, leaders of most of Britain's religious faiths and senior politicians. They included the Prime Minister and 4 of her predecessors. The lesson was read by the Prince of Wales.
They that go down to the sea in ships and occupy their business in great waters, these men see the works of the Lord and his wonders in the deep. For at his word the stormy wind ariseth, which lifteth up the waves thereof. They are carried up to the heaven, and down again to the deep. Their soul melteth away because of the trouble.
The Archbishop of Canterbury prayed for so rare a person with such outstanding gifts.
His integrity and flair for leadership, his lifelong devotion to the Royal Navy, his courage and sense of companionship in times of war, his dedication to the cause of freedom and justice, his service to the peoples of Southeast Asia and to India at a critical period in her history.
And then the whole congregation joined the singing of the Sailors' Hymn. As the coffin was carried from Westminster Abbey, the ceremonial came to an end, and the family part of the day's service began. The Queen, with the royal family, accompanied the coffin to Romsey for the burial of her uncle and trusted advisor. A lifeguard Land Rover with escort of armoured cars took the coffin to Waterloo for a special train to Romsey. The many wreaths were taken to the Abbey at Romsey. They came from old comrades, friends and relatives. One from the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh carried a simple note, in loving memory from Philip and Lilibet.
Oh, he loved it. He loved Broadlands. He always wanted to get back to Broadlands. Whenever we went abroad, his first thoughts would be to get home. And he loved, I mean, you look around the peace and tranquility, and for a man who's spent all his life dedicated to the state and travelling around the world, since 65, he still worked very hard, but he had more chance to be at home, and he loved it, every moment of it.
It was a pretty close one. It is, of course, their parish church here.
Was Lord Mountbatten a fairly frequent member of the congregation?
I think regular rather than frequent. You have to remember that he was away a great deal on national occasions and overseas. But when he was at home and had visitors, he would bring them to the Abbey for our services here.
How has Romsey reacted to news of his death?
Well, we've all been very, very saddened by it and shocked, and I think there's quite a bit of anger as well in many hearts and minds.
The statue stands on the lawn beside the Foreign Office, close to 10 Downing Street, and overlooking the old Admiralty building in Whitehall. Underlining Earl Mountbatten's stature as a statesman, no less than 4 former Prime Ministers were in attendance, together with members of today's government and the chiefs of the armed services. Mrs. Thatcher and the Earl's daughter, the Countess Mountbatten, greeted members of the royal family, for whom this was a solemn occasion, as well as a celebration for a national hero. Closest to him perhaps was Prince Charles, to whom Lord Louis had become friend and confidant. But all were there. Princess Anne was joined on the royal stand by her young brothers, Prince Edward and Prince Andrew. The gathering was made complete by the arrival of the Queen herself. The Navy Guard inspected, the Queen walked towards the rostrum. The crowd of dignitaries heard her speak of Lord Louis as a statesman, friend and close member of her family.
There were so many sides to this man. A first-class professional naval officer who was equally at home with his sailors or his Burma Star veterans, with the film stars of Hollywood or with world figures. A sailor statesman who made a real impact on national and international scenes in peace and in war. But above all, Dickie delighted in being a family man, and he was always ready to help any members of the family.
It then fell to her, accompanied by the Prime Minister and the Countess Mountbatten, to unveil the statue. Lord Louis's daughter gave her thanks to the Queen.
That you, ma'am, should have unveiled his statue yourself would have filled his heart with joy, because he knew no greater pleasure in life than to serve you and your family.
The statue stands in honor of a man whose achievements touched so many and spanned most areas of public life. But it was his family and close friends who led the celebrations to the memory of Admiral of the Fleet, Lord Louis Mountbatten. Alistair Stewart, ITN, Whitehall.
It was a grand state occasion with much pomp and pageantry, but it was also very much a family affair for the man known as Uncle Dickie. Everybody who was anybody was there, including an array of kings and queens, princes and princesses. Security checks were the most elaborate since the royal wedding 2 years ago, with even the airspace above central London closed. Politicians of right and left, past and present, heard the Queen extol the virtues of her late uncle.
A first-class professional naval officer who was equally at home with his sailors or his Burma Star veterans, with the film stars of Hollywood or with world figures.
Lord Louis will be remembered as a sailor and a statesman, but first and foremost he was a man of the sea. The statue, which was approved by his daughter, Countess Mountbatten, shows the Earl as Admiral of the Fleet, with binoculars round his neck and in characteristic style, hand behind his back. Most agree.
Unveiled a statue of Lord Louis outside the Foreign Office in London. The statue, by Czech sculptor Franta Belski, was commissioned by the government, and it was paid for by subscriptions from friends of Lord Mountbatten around the world. Speaking at the ceremony today, the Queen described her uncle as a remarkable man who changed the course of history. Despite the rain, thousands of spectators turned out for the ceremony, and we were out among the crowds this morning to see why so many waited for so long.
I'm a royalist through and through. I think there's nothing on anyone like the royal family. And also Lord Mountbatten did such a lot in the last war. We owe so much to him and people like him.
He's one of our greatest men, Lord Mountbatten.
Did you have any connections with him at all in the war?
No, I was in the Air Force as a matter of fact. But that doesn't mean anything at all. If I'd have been in any of the other companies, I'd have been just the same.
So why have you decided to actually come here in person today?
As I said, to pay tribute.
He was a great very great friend. He was so right down to earth, just like talking to you.
I was in Burma. I served in the Royal Air Force, Coastal Command, and he flew with us on a number of occasions. He just was a born leader, organiser, great man.
I served in Atlantic, France and Germany, Burma and Pacific. I was on one of the destroyers in his flotilla, the Kelly, and I served under him in Burma, Trincomalee, on a ship called the Chilean. So that's why I'm here.
Today's ceremony was watched with particular interest in the Hampshire town where Lord Mountbatten lived. This is Broadlands, the family estate. It was Lord Louis's home for much of his life, and after his death, it was here that his body was laid to rest. Chris Searle was there this morning to share the local memories.
In the British Legion Club in Romsey, they keep a poem. Part of it reads, "We wanted to be there to share him as he made his last way past the throng, past the shops and the houses and the people who'd known and loved him so long. We had all lost a mentor, a father, a friend and a colleague, a boss. At the thought of this terrible loss, from Dartmouth to Delhi they knew him, and they each had a story to tell." Well, Romsey has many stories to tell, stories of friendship and compassion, stories of heroism in war, even a trophy captured from the enemy. Walter Cooper, DCM, fought with Mountbatten in Burma.
I can remember one instance at Kohima, after the Battle of Kohima had taken place, that we went back for a rest, and he called us all round. He said, never mind all the ranks, and one of them called us all round and got on his old soapbox, which he took out of his jeep. And he said, now, he said, we've won the Battle of Kohima, and now we're going to fight through the monsoons. He said, that is the only way to beat the Jap. He said, I know you will call me a bastard, he said, but you're going to fight through the monsoons, and that's all there is to it. And from then on, we fought through the monsoons.
And you did?
And we did.
I think I remember Lord Mountbatten. We didn't call him Lord Mountbatten, we called him Lord Louis. Some called him Lordie, some Lord Louis. We remember him with such love and affection because he was our family and we were his family. And everyone, I can speak for everyone in Romsey, we all adored him. He was something really special in our lives, and we were so tragically upset when he was assassinated.
Romsey was the Earl's hometown, and at the centre of the town is the Abbey, where he regularly worshipped. Inside Romsey Abbey there's a tomb which marks the resting place of Earl Mountbatten. It's the residents of Romsey who must have felt most acutely the tragedy of that day 4 years ago when their most loved and respected neighbour was so crudely assassinated. Older people around here remember with affection the way he took an active part in the life of their community. As his statue was unveiled this morning by the Queen in London, the memories came flooding back. Many of the residents of Edwina Mountbatten House either worked on the family estate or knew the Earl and his family. What did you think when you saw that statue unveiled?
Well, I thought it was very necessary for a man of his. I thought it was a thing that should have been done before. And he was little. So I know what India is. I served in India for 5 years. And I know what a job he had in bringing India to the state it is today.
Mrs. Jones, you were cook at Broadlands, weren't you?
Yes.
And you were invited to the ceremony, but unfortunately you weren't able to go.
No, because of it.
But seeing that statue unveiled must have brought back a lot of memories.
Yes, it did.
What was he like to work for?
Very, very nice. Very, very kind. He had a lot of guests to stay down there. You know, important guests and that. He always brought them down to the kitchen and that.
Did he? Did he come and meet you?
Yes, used to be.